On December 24, 1887, Friedrich Brenner locked the doors of his butcher shop on Lackawanna Avenue 3 hours before his usual closing time. When the Scranton Police Department forced entry 2 days later, they found Brenner hanging from a meat hook in his cold storage room, his body positioned among the Christmas geese. What disturbed investigators most was not the suicide itself, but the 37 teeth scattered across his cutting table, none of which belonged to the butcher. Friedrich Brenner arrived in Scranton from Bavaria in 1881, part of the wave of German immigrants drawn to Pennsylvania's anthracite coal region. Unlike most newcomers who descended into the mines, Brenner opened a modest butcher shop near the corner of Lackawanna and Wyoming Avenues, capitalizing on the city's rapidly growing population. By 1887, Scranton had swelled to over 75,000 residents, and the demand for fresh meat kept Brenner's business steady. According to city directory records, Brenner's meat market operated from a narrow 2-story building with living quarters above the shop. The ground floor featured a retail space with a display counter, while the back room housed cutting tables and a cold storage area where Brenner kept his inventory hanging on iron hooks. Like other butchers of his era, Brenner maintained a small yard behind the building where he kept livestock until slaughter. The shop's location placed it in the heart of Scranton's commercial district, just blocks from where inventor Charles Van de Poel had driven the city's first electric trolley earlier that year. This proximity to the trolley line brought Brenner a steady stream of customers from the surrounding neighborhoods, particularly from the dense immigrant communities clustered in the valley below the mine entrances. Dr. Samuel Whitmore, the Lackawanna County coroner who examined Brenner's body on December 26th, documented his findings in a report that survives in the county archives. The butcher had died from asphyxiation, consistent with hanging, though Whitmore noted several disturbing elements. Brenner's hands bore defensive wounds, deep cuts across his palms and fingers that appeared self-inflicted. More significantly, the butcher's mouth had been forced open post-mortem, and his tongue removed with what Whitmore described as professional precision. The 37 teeth found on Brenner's cutting table presented investigators with their first real mystery. Whitmore's dental examination confirmed that none matched Brenner's own teeth. The teeth appeared to come from multiple individuals, ranging in age from adolescent to elderly. Each tooth had been extracted with considerable force, showing fracture patterns consistent with brutal removal. Whitmore estimated they had been collected over a period of several weeks. Sheriff Thomas McKenna's investigation began with interviews of Brenner's neighbors and regular customers. The testimony of Margaret Sullivan, who operated a boarding house 2 buildings down from the butcher's shop, proved particularly significant. Sullivan stated in her sworn deposition that Brenner's behavior had changed markedly in the weeks following Thanksgiving. According to Sullivan's account, Brenner had always maintained regular hours, opening at dawn and closing as the sun set. He attended services at the German Lutheran Church on Mulberry Street and kept to himself otherwise. But starting in late November, Sullivan noticed lights burning in Brenner's shop well past midnight. She heard sounds from the building that disturbed her, metallic scraping and what she described as singing in a language that was not German. Sullivan's testimony included a detail that would take on greater significance as the investigation progressed. On the evening of December 15th, she witnessed Brenner accepting a delivery after his shop had closed. 2 men brought a large wooden crate on a cart, struggling with its weight. Sullivan could not identify the men in the darkness, but she noted they arrived from the direction of the Lackawanna Coal Mine No. 7, one of the deepest shafts in the region. The investigation expanded when Sheriff McKenna interviewed other shopkeepers on Lackawanna Avenue. Thomas Chen, who ran a general store across the street, provided testimony that complicated the timeline. Chen stated that Brenner had begun refusing service to certain customers in early December, turning away miners who had previously been regular patrons. When Chen asked Brenner about this change in policy, the butcher responded only that he could no longer sell meat to men who carried coal dust under their fingernails. This selective refusal became a pattern. Brenner continued serving the wives and children of miners, along with shopkeepers and other townspeople, but would not conduct business with any man who worked underground. Several miners complained to the Scranton Police Department, though no formal action was taken at the time. The complaints were dismissed as a merchant's right to refuse service. Dr. Whitmore's autopsy report on Brenner noted another peculiarity that investigators initially overlooked. The butcher's lungs contained traces of anthracite coal dust, despite the fact that Brenner had never worked in the mines. The concentration was significant enough that Whitmore initially questioned whether Brenner might have spent extended time underground, though no evidence supported this possibility. The contents of Brenner's shop provided the investigation with its most disturbing evidence. When officers inventoried the premises, they discovered his cold storage room contained far more meat than a shop of that size would typically stock. Brenner had 43 hanging carcasses of pork, 31 sides of beef, and 72 plucked geese prepared for Christmas sales. The volume suggested Brenner had been preparing for an unprecedented level of business, though his customer base had actually declined due to his refusal to serve miners. Among the hanging meat, officers found a locked wooden chest. Sheriff McKenna's report describes the chest as approximately 3 feet long and 2 feet wide, constructed from rough-hewn lumber that appeared much older than the surrounding furnishings. The wood bore no maker's mark, but chemical analysis conducted years later would date it to the 1740s. Inside the chest, investigators found a collection of items that defied immediate explanation. Along with the 37 extracted teeth, the chest contained 37 fingernails, each one torn rather than cut. There were 37 locks of human hair, ranging in color from black to gray, and there were 37 small cloth bags, each containing what appeared to be coal dust mixed with a dark, viscous substance that Whitmore's analysis identified as human blood. The number 37 held significance that became clear when Sheriff McKenna cross-referenced his findings with recent missing person reports. In the 6 weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve, 37 miners from Lackawanna Coal Mine No. 7 had failed to return home from their shifts. The mine foreman, William Jessup, had reported these disappearances to company management but not to local authorities, attributing the losses to the dangerous nature of deep shaft mining. Miners disappeared regularly in Scranton's coal operations. Cave-ins, flooding, and methane explosions claimed lives with grim frequency. The depth of the shafts made body recovery difficult and often impossible. Families learned to accept that their fathers, brothers, and sons might vanish into the earth without leaving remains to bury. Jessup's failure to report the disappearances to authorities was unusual only in scale, not in kind. When McKenna interviewed Jessup about the 37 missing miners, the foreman provided details that suggested a pattern. All 37 had worked on the same crew, digging a new lateral tunnel at the 800-foot depth. According to Jessup, the crew had broken through into what they initially believed was a natural cave formation on December 10th. The miners reported finding carved stone within the cave, symbols that none of them recognized. Jessup's personal journal, obtained by McKenna during the investigation, contained an entry from December 11th that described his own descent to examine the discovery. He wrote that the cave appeared to be artificial, a chamber carved from the bedrock beneath the coal seam. The walls bore repeated carvings of teeth, thousands of them covering every surface. At the center of the chamber stood a stone basin filled with what Jessup initially mistook for oil but later identified as old blood. According to Jessup's journal, he ordered the lateral tunnel sealed immediately after his inspection. He directed the crew to collapse the passage with controlled explosives, burying the chamber under tons of rock and coal. The 37 miners who had discovered the chamber completed this work on December 12th. They emerged from the shaft that evening covered in coal dust and bleeding from their noses, a symptom Jessup attributed to the explosive concussion. Over the following 10 days, each of the 37 miners disappeared. The first vanished on December 13th, simply failing to arrive for his shift. 2 more were gone by December 15th. The disappearances accelerated after that date, with clusters of men vanishing on December 18th, December 20th, and December 23rd. The last miner to disappear left his home on the morning of December 24th, telling his wife he needed to visit Brenner's butcher shop before it closed for Christmas. Margaret Sullivan's testimony about the late-night delivery on December 15th aligned precisely with the timeline of the first disappearances. When Sheriff McKenna traced the path from Lackawanna Coal Mine No. 7 to Brenner's shop, he calculated the journey would take approximately 40 minutes on foot, pushing a loaded cart. The route passed through several neighborhoods, yet Sullivan's account was the only documented observation of the delivery. Dr. Whitmore's examination of the teeth provided the investigation with its most damning evidence. Using dental records maintained by Dr. Edmund Harris, one of Scranton's few practicing dentists, Whitmore identified 8 of the 37 teeth as belonging to miners reported missing from No. 7. The remaining 29 teeth could not be definitively matched due to incomplete records, but Whitmore's analysis confirmed they had been extracted from adult males of working age. The discovery of this connection prompted Sheriff McKenna to re-examine Brenner's shop more thoroughly. Officers dismantled the cutting tables and examined the floorboards beneath. In the cold storage room, they found a trapdoor concealed under heavy flagstones. The trapdoor opened onto a narrow shaft that descended approximately 15 feet before ending in a small earthen chamber. McKenna's report describes the chamber as roughly circular, perhaps 8 feet in diameter. The walls were raw earth, but the floor had been carefully excavated and leveled. At the center of the chamber lay the 37 bodies of the missing miners, arranged in a spoke pattern with their heads pointing inward and their feet toward the walls. Each body had been stripped naked, and each bore identical markings across the chest, symbols carved into the flesh that matched the carvings Jessup had described finding in the sealed cave. The bodies showed no signs of violent death. Dr. Whitmore conducted abbreviated examinations at the scene and concluded that all 37 men had died from acute respiratory failure, likely caused by some form of suffocation. Their mouths had been forced open and their tongues removed. Each man's teeth had been extracted, their fingernails torn away, and locks of their hair cut from their scalps. The condition of the bodies suggested they had died within hours of their disappearances. Yet Whitmore noted that decomposition had not progressed as expected. Despite spending days or weeks in the underground chamber, the bodies showed minimal decay. The temperature of the chamber, measured at a constant 52 degrees, did not fully explain this preservation. Whitmore theorized that some chemical process had arrested normal decomposition, though he could not identify the mechanism. Among the bodies, officers found evidence of Friedrich Brenner's final actions before his suicide. A leather journal lay at the center of the spoke pattern, its pages filled with writing in German. Translation of the journal revealed Brenner's account of the events that led to the murders. Brenner wrote that he had been approached by something he called the Tooth Mother on December 10th, the same day the miners broke through into the carved chamber. He described her as neither living nor dead, a presence that entered his shop through the floorboards and filled his lungs with coal dust. She spoke to him in a language older than German, older than Latin, demanding payment for the violation of her resting place. The Tooth Mother's price was specific: 37 lives for 37 pieces of her chamber wall that the miners had damaged with their explosives. She required the teeth of the violators, their hair, their nails, and their final breath, all to be delivered to her beneath Brenner's shop before the sun rose on Christmas Day. In exchange, she promised Brenner prosperity beyond measure, endless customers, and meat that would never spoil. Brenner's journal entries from December 11th through December 23rd documented his methodical compliance with these demands. He described waiting in his shop after hours, watching through the window until he saw one of the marked miners walking past. He would step outside, call the man's name, and invite him into the shop to discuss a special Christmas order. Once inside, Brenner would offer the miner a cup of mulled wine, drugged with laudanum purchased from an apothecary on Penn Avenue. When the miner lost consciousness, Brenner would drag him through the trapdoor and into the earthen chamber. There, he would arrange the body in the growing pattern, extract the teeth with pliers from his butcher's toolkit, tear away the fingernails, cut the hair, and finally place a cloth soaked in chloroform over the miner's face until breathing ceased. He would collect the final breath in one of the small cloth bags, mixing it with coal dust from the miner's clothes and blood from the tooth extractions. The journal's final entry, written on December 24th, showed Brenner's mental deterioration. He wrote that he had completed the tooth mother's task, delivering all 37 lives before the deadline. But when he descended into the chamber to present the collected teeth, hair, nails, and breath, he found the bodies had changed. They had not decayed, but transformed, their flesh taking on the texture and color of anthracite coal. Brenner wrote that the tooth mother emerged from the mouths of the transformed miners, flowing upward like black smoke. She filled the chamber, speaking words that Brenner transcribed phonetically but could not translate. She thanked him for his service and explained that his payment would be eternal. He would hang in his shop forever, his body preserved like the meat he had sold, an offering to the appetite that lived beneath the coal seams. The journal ended mid-sentence. She is opening my mouth, and I cannot. Sheriff McKenna's final report on the case, submitted to the Lackawanna County Court in February 1888, attributed the deaths to Friedrich Brenner acting alone while suffering from severe mental illness. The report made no mention of the tooth mother, the carved chamber in the mine, or the inexplicable preservation of the bodies. McKenna recommended the earthen chamber beneath Brenner's shop be filled with concrete and the building demolished, advice the property owner followed within the week. Lackawanna Coal Mine No. 7 continued operations until 1931, when declining anthracite demand forced its closure. During those 43 years, the mine experienced an unusually high rate of unexplained disappearances among its workers. Company records document 127 miners who simply failed to return from their shifts, their bodies never recovered. In each case, the missing man's work crew reported hearing singing in the hours before the disappearance, voices echoing through the tunnels in a language none of them recognized. The site of Brenner's butcher shop remained vacant for 17 years after its demolition. Multiple attempts to construct new buildings on the lot encountered the same problem. Workers would excavate the foundation only to find the fill concrete had cracked and subsided, creating voids that suggested empty space below. Each time, construction would halt when workers reported hearing sounds from beneath the ground, a wet clicking that reminded them of teeth chattering in extreme cold. In 1905, the property was purchased by the Scranton Electric Company, which built a substation on the lot without excavating deeper than 3 feet. The substation operated without incident until its decommissioning in 1963. During the building's demolition, workers discovered that the concrete foundation had never properly bonded to the earth below. Gaps of several inches separated the concrete from the soil, and within these gaps, demolition crews found hundreds of human teeth. The current occupant of the lot, built in 1967, is a branch of the Fidelity Deposit and Discount Bank. The building's basement extends only 4 feet below street level, as geological surveys conducted during construction revealed unstable soil conditions at greater depths. Bank employees have reported persistent problems with the basement air circulation system, which frequently delivers coal dust into the ventilation despite the building's location more than a mile from the nearest historical mine entrance. On December 24, 2019, a construction crew working on utility upgrades for the bank building broke through into a void approximately 12 feet below the basement floor. The crew foreman's initial report described the void as a circular chamber containing what appeared to be fossilized remains arranged in a spoke pattern. Before a formal archaeological survey could be conducted, the void collapsed, filling with debris from the surrounding soil. The Scranton Historical Society has no record of the construction crew's discovery. The bank's insurance company sealed all documentation related to the incident under attorney-client privilege. The utility work was completed using an alternative route that avoided the area of collapse. And on certain December nights, particularly when the temperature drops below freezing, residents of the apartments above the bank report hearing sounds rising through their floors, a rhythmic scraping like metal on bone, accompanied by voices singing in a language that makes their teeth ache.